Hi everyone, this is an Interintellect SuperSalon with Cyan Banister. I just told her before you guys came in that to me she's not so much an entrepreneur or investor, more like a rock star. And if you have ever the heavenly luck to meet her in person, that's so. I used to work with rock stars, and believe me when I say that. And I think to me this also comes with, an added level of sensitivity and an artistic approach to what it means to be a human, which I think is so present in your work, Cyan. And so I think you're an amazing person to discuss, overcoming adversity with. So this is going to be our focus today. Hi, Billy, as well. Billy and I are in the same town now, so that's news. So let's dive in. What we will do, I will have a couple of questions to Cyan, and after each one, we will open the floor. So if you have a good question in minute 5, you don't have to force yourself to remember it for 50 minutes. Okay, this is not one of those. You can tell when you're hosting, and there's somebody who's just trying to remember a question. That there's a specific face that comes with it. So we will help you. Avoid that. So. My first question basically is more asking for a comment than a question. I think you're one of the people in tech with the most exciting life stories. I would love to hear if you were to summarize how you got where you are today, sitting at home, just having woken up with your son, just having handed you a little piece of chocolate before other people came in. How did you get here? What was the road? In the main stops?
It's funny because I am in the exact right place that I need to be mentally in my life for that question. Maybe had we had this intellect salon a month ago, and we'll get to that in a moment, I might not have answered the question correctly, maybe, but I think boundless curiosity, is the top thing that sort of goes to the top of my mind when I think about what helped me survive. And we'll get into survival in a moment about what that is and what did I have to survive. But I survived because I was boundlessly curious and I kept asking questions. I asked myself a question, which is the most important question we all ask of ourselves, which is, why am I here? There has to be more than this, and when you ask that question, you have a fork in the road, which is you can choose to say, there's no point. And you can choose to go down that rabbit hole, right? Of sorrow and self-pity and all of those sorts of things. Or you can choose to shut that branch off and choose the other branch, which is, why am I here? And explore that until it reaches a point of only you can discover where it goes. But basically you follow those ideas and eventually you get the answers. And recently I got some of the answers. And so I feel like, I know we wanted to have this salon and we were trying to pick a date, but I feel like the date ended up being kind of serendipitous for something that is happening inside me right now. So I'm very excited to share it with everybody. Energized to share.
Energized. I really believe in fate when it comes to Interintellect salons. I think there's a moment when it should happen to you, and it usually does happen in the right moments. This is fantastic. I like to joke that I always thought I would have a Proustian life, so I would party in my 20s and then retire and write about it from bed. But actually, when I turned 30, a lot of these scripts were suddenly gone. Where I come from, there's literally no script for a woman as an individual over 30. You're supposed to kind of merge into your family and lose your identity in some sense, or retain a girlish identity, right? Mm-hmm. And so I remember this incredible weird feeling of freedom and how raw it was and how vulnerable that was. Because we're also, if you don't ask, why am I here? There's also some comfort in there because you don't have to ask, you don't have to find out that maybe you're in the wrong place. But when your exoskeleton is gone, that gave you the script, suddenly you have to ask it. And then sometimes you will be, oh my God, I should not be here.
Exactly.
Do you remember a particular moment in your life when you asked yourself, why am I here?
Yes.
And either couldn't give yourself the right answer, you were like, I need to get the F out of here. This is not the right place for me.
I think he's here in the room. I'm so excited. Well, I'm so energized and thrilled. I'm trying to get rid of the word excited, which I'll explain later. But I am very energized that Tom Cross is here in the room. But Tom, not to shine a light on him and make him embarrassed or anything, but in our early 20s, we went to a coffee shop, and he is another boundlessly curious person. And we were laying on these bean bags and talking about life. And a lot of people ask you questions, or when you tell them about your story about your life, they just go, oh, wow. And then that's it. But he said, how did you survive? And I made up a bullshit answer. And I knew it was bullshit. Like, I knew in my heart it was bullshit. And I just told him, oh, as a middle child, I was mostly ignored. And that's probably why. And so I realized in that moment, though, that I gave someone I really care about and love and respect a bullshit answer. And I realized I owed it to him and to myself to figure out what the solution to that answer was. And so I had to go searching for it. And boy, did I search. I searched for now 20 years. And so recently I finally found the answer. And, I think it's different for everybody, like you said. But the biggest thing is that we as human beings have it within us to overcome any adversity, anything. It's really just sort of how you approach it and how you think about it and whether or not you view it as a lesson. So, but we as human beings also have these protective mechanisms where if you've been traumatized, we protect ourselves. And again, you have a fork in the road every single time, which is, do I go down the road of sorrow, or do I choose the higher thought about myself and about others? And when I was younger, I always chose the higher thought. Tried to anyway. Sometimes we tear other people down, or we feel bad and we assume it's everybody else's fault. But the one thing that I had that I think helped me survive more than anything was this feeling that there was more to life out there, and I had an important part to play in it. And if you feel that, which I'm assuming that you're all here because you do, you got to follow that spark, because there is more to life and you do have a very important part to play in it.
I often think that that one of the reasons why the 5 world religions are so limby, right? We can imagine that there had been millions and millions of religions, and these 5 somehow survived, right? There was a huge evolutionary competition.
Because there's some truth to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And they give people something incredibly valuable over and over again. And I do think that one of the things that religion got really, really right is the question of resilience. That you're in the deepest throat, you're just about to be executed by the Romans, and lions will eat you in the arena. And then you can go up. When they go low, you go up, right?
That's right. When they go low, you go high.
Yes, and you raise your consciousness to something higher, where you might believe that there is a higher being. And I think that religion keeps giving this over and over again. If you talk to a devout, Christian, they will see, God testing them in their problems. Muslims believe that you're only given as much by Allah that you can handle, and that it's a test. And we spend billions of dollars on self-help books to tell you the same things and basically reinvent the wheel, when we have thousands of years of texts who have already figured this out a long, long time ago.
The answers aren't good. The answers are in all the books. It's funny because once I figured out what true happiness is, I went around and looked at all the books, and it doesn't matter how many books we read if we don't believe it. It doesn't matter if you can't rewire your mind. Yeah. And so you'll look at these books and you'll be like, well, gosh, that seems simple enough. It's a choice. but you're like, how does one make the choice?
Yeah.
And you have to decide and truly decide inside of yourself to end all suffering and shed it like a surgeon. You just cut it out. And then that's where happiness is. I survived so I could get to this point. So I guess we could talk about the adversity that I faced. They might not even know.
I would love to get there. If everybody's happy to hold their questions for a little bit longer, we could actually get to some of your life adventures, just to give a context for this conversation. And thank you so much. I mean, your energy is just, oh my God, it's like sunshine in the room. I love it. Not even just sunshine, but with a lot of colorful flowers, at least in my mind.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I love seeing all the smiling faces looking at me right now. So
thank you. All right, well, let's dive into Cyan's life. What do you say? With the surgical, I love that you said surgical precision. This is something I find in like highly resilient people, that they have a part of their brain that is almost anthropologically interested in their own suffering. And you can look at it like it's someone else, like, okay, I'm crying and whatever, like I have the physical reactions, but there's something I can like push this problem out there and look at it.
Yes, I think that that's very healthy. And then eventually you integrate it back into yourself. It's super healthy to look at that other person as another person, because technically they're gone. So they don't exist anymore.
So would you tell us your story, Sarah?
Yes. So I'm going to go back to being born, because I think that matters. When I was born to two college kids who were very young, 18, 19 years old. And, obviously there's the story your parents tell you, and then there's the truth. Somewhere in between there, is the truth. But my parents, interestingly, have two very different stories about my birth, which I've always found fascinating. So my father, I grew up without. My mother was a mostly single mother. She remarried a few times, but for the most part, we didn't have a strong father figure around. And my father was out of the picture shortly after my birth. But I got to meet him, which we'll get to that point later in the story. I got to meet him when I was 18, and I heard this version of his story, which was on the night that I was born, he was pacing around in the parking lot in Tucson, Arizona, searching for a sign of what my name should be. And he's an artist. My mother is an artist. My mom's the one giving birth to me right now, because in the 70s, the fathers weren't allowed in the room. The mother had to give birth by herself, and you couldn't have doulas. Sometimes I think you could have your mother in there, and that's it. The baby usually got taken away from the parent and put into a room. So when you see that in the movies, that's real. And you didn't get to spend time immediately with your mother, which is something that has changed drastically since I was born, which I'm very thankful for. And
the same thing happened in the 80s in Eastern Europe where I was born. They basically gave sugared tea to the infants right away and put this bag on the woman instead of the baby, with the added difference, just to horrify you a little bit. So technically it was already legal for husbands to be in the room, but the doctor specifically told my mother that if the man is in the room, he will never want to have sex with her again.
Yeah, so they say things like that.
Yeah, be traumatized fully alone in an Eastern European hospital, or have your guy there, but like that's the end of it. It's a great trade-off.
So I think it's good to point this out, because our trauma starts the moment we're born. Sometimes it starts in the womb, and it's completely out of your control. So when you burst into this world, you are at the mercy of the adults that decided to bring you here. And and you have to kind of succumb as a child. You have no choice. So these patterns get put on us as a kid. And when I was born, my mother had a very different experience. She was in excruciating pain. They had to rip me out with forceps, and I had breached. Basically what had happened was I was in a birthing position that I was supposed to be in. And then I flipped and my umbilical cord wrapped around my neck. And so they had to get me out because I was suffocating. And I came out bright blue. And so the list of names that my mother had, Patricia, I'm going to call her Patricia. And that's part of my healing process. Okay, so I'll get to that later. Patricia. She saw a bright blue baby, and she saw a baby that got whisked off to a room in which they told her that I might not live. And so on her list of names was the name Cyan. I was born cyanotic. And so she was like, Cyan. So that's mom's story. Dad's story is, I was out walking around looking at the heavens above, and I saw a blue star in the sky. And I decided your name is Blue Star. My middle name is Star. My great aunt or whatever last name is Star. And my middle name is spelled R with 2 R's with like a pirate, so Star. So obviously my mother's probably telling the truth here. So my middle name is Star after a family member, not a star in the sky. My dad probably just made up some fantasy. And it's the difference between my father and Patricia. So my father is he paints the most bizarre things you've ever seen. He lives in this fantasy world. And he's very creative. And my Patricia is a photorealist, eventually became a scientist, and, could illustrate anything. Like, she had a job when she was younger where she did those police profiles where you'd have to tell people, like, and then she would make the sketch. So she was really good at stuff like that, but really, really bad at making shit up, unless it was a lie. She's very good at lying. Anyway, so, but there's a difference. There's a difference between lying about whether or not you have milk in the fridge and like making something up. That's fantastic and believable. My father is really good at making shit up. So, I came into this world a bloody mess, and my father and Patricia already had a child, which was my sister. And my father, I don't know if people need trigger warnings, but I'm going to give a warning here that this involves, I just want to be mindful. I just want to be mindful. This involves molestation and all sorts of abuse. So if you've experienced this and don't want to experience it again, feel free to stop listening to me right now. So I didn't experience any of this because I was too young to remember it. But my sister was molested by my father. Patricia left my sister with my father, and he abused her. And so that really shaped her future, as you can imagine. Like, the innocence of a child was gone, completely gone. And I was the painful reminder of the trauma that happened to my sister, because this face that you see looks a lot like my dad's. And so all the people in my life growing up would always tell me, you look like your dad. You look like your dad. And then there's these hush-hush conversations that happen in the background between my sister and family. And I had to piece together little pieces because no one would be honest with me about what happened. And so I mystified my father. I turned him into a superhero, which children will do. And I decided he was on a space station orbiting the Earth, and he had really important things to do that were more important than me. And that's where he was. And eventually I would find him. And so I placed him in space. And if you think about it, it's a coping mechanism. Children lie, and they lie to survive, and they lie to protect themselves, and they tell themselves these stories. And sometimes these stories become reality. Luckily for me, I understood fiction from reality. And so, but when I was little, I really convinced myself that dad was up there. And he was a spaceman. And when people talked about him, I just thought about him in space. When I heard all these awful things about him, I said, he's up in space. I don't know. I'm going to ask him someday because he's going to come down. And then I'll ask him and I'll get the truth from him. So I decided that I was going to withhold judgment at a very young age, which I think is an important skill for all of us, which is withhold judgment until you're faced with what could be the truth. Because we can't know. We're not time travelers. We can't go back with a perfect vision and see what happened, right? We can't. So I grew up in this mess. Eventually, obviously, Patricia and my father parted ways when I was maybe a year old. I never saw him again. Not really. I think he showed up and dropped off some presents, and there were some traumatic events that happened where my grandfather beat him up. But other than that, didn't see dad. And so my person who gave birth to me is a very injured soul. I don't know how else to describe her. She probably did the best she could, and she didn't have the tools in her tool shed to raise children, but she kept having this, which is bizarre. So there was my sister and there was me, and then along comes a little brother. Little brother comes along, and I have a stepfather, and this stepfather is a Persian stepfather. And he started out being not so strict, and towards the end of their relationship tried to convert us to being Muslim. And so at this point, I'd already tried Baptist, Protestant, Catholic. I tried being Catholic, and now we were trying to be Muslim. And I remember his prayer rugs and, him trying to teach us about the Quran and really desperately trying to save our souls. And he was a good man, and honestly, a very principled man. And I really looked up to him, and I really felt like he was a good human being. So there came one of those forks in the road, probably one of the hardest forks in the road I've ever experienced. And it's something I'm working on healing inside me, which is, I was maybe, I want to say 12, maybe 12, 11 or 12. And there was a court battle for custody for my little brother. And Patricia asked me to fabricate that my stepfather raped me in court. And she planted this story in my head. And not only did she plant it earlier in my life. And I realized that what if whatever she's telling me at all times isn't true? The one person you're supposed to trust more than anybody in the world lied to you repeatedly. So what earlier I said she didn't have a fantastic imagination, not in her art, but it turns out she has quite a fantastic imagination when it comes to manipulating lives. So when I was younger, she fed me some tea. Hold on one second. My son is here. He's going to grab a piece of chocolate. Hold on a moment. And then he's going to exit.
You're very welcome to join. Lincoln, come join us.
Yeah, do you want to say hi? There's a bunch of happy faces here. No? Okay, take the chocolate and go. All right. So remind me where I was. I think
we're at the trial, and realizing that not everything that you've been told since your early years was true.
Well, we're in the car, and I realized that before she had kind of primed me for this moment, which was she gave me a drink one night to go to sleep at a party. And she put brandy in the drink. And she told me, this is to help you sleep. I want you to go to sleep so that we can have our party. And I drank this brandied milk and I went to sleep. And she kept bringing this up in the car of that was the night that it happened. That was the night. And I realized, no. And then she kept trying to plant all these memories, like, you know, you woke up sore. No, I didn't. Like, there was all these things that she kept trying to insinuate about this man that I felt was a good man. And I don't know what came over me, but I jumped out of a moving truck and I rolled on the floor, the ground, and I ran and ran until I could get to a phone. And I got to a phone, and the first thing I did was call our family psychiatrist. And I didn't realize that the psychiatrist was court appointed. I thought that this was a psychiatrist that Patricia had picked for us, for our family. And it turned out that the court had mandated it as part of the divorce. And I had no idea, but I called the psychiatrist and I said, this emergency situation is happening to me. I don't know what to do. I have no one to talk to. I cannot put an innocent man in jail for something he did not do. And therefore, I don't think that anything that she claims that he did, he did.
Sorry to interrupt. How old were you when you made this really huge decision?
I want to say 11 or 12. Wow. Children are capable of making very big decisions. And I think that's one thing we don't realize about them, is that they can absolutely find morality in the darkest times and choose some of the best decisions if they have to. We don't give them permission to do that anymore. We try to shield them from all of the adversity in the world instead of allowing them themselves to navigate it. We can't shield them from adversity. We just can't. We can do our best, but it'll seep through somehow. It'll seep through the music they listen to. It'll seep through from their peers. It'll seep through. It doesn't matter. It's going to happen. You know, life is filled with adversity. It's just how we choose to deal with it. I beat myself up about that decision in that car for a long, long time. You guys have no idea. I thought it was my fault that my brother was taken away from us. Because he was removed because I didn't show up in court. This was all revealed about what she had done. And if you can imagine, I became enemy number one. I was the last child left in the house. My sister, I didn't get to that, but my sister was removed. My brother was removed, and then I was the last child standing.
So if they deemed, first of all, having a court-appointed psychiatrist, I imagine is already a bad sign. Like there was a reason why this person was appointed. How can they remove two children, but not the third?
But not me. Exactly. It's a mystery. It's a mystery. I've asked this question repeatedly. I asked my stepdad, why was I left with her? And he said, I was in the room where they made the decision and they decided that they weren't sure what to do with you. And so they left you. And I was like, wow, okay, wow. So
it's like the worst reason to do.
It was the worst thing they could have done.
Horrible. Oh my God.
Because then after that, I was in and out of foster homes. I was off and on the street. This manifested in a way where Patricia decided to just go to school and work a job 24/7. So she got a job where she slept at her job, where because I honestly believe she couldn't look at me. I think she just couldn't look at me because I betrayed her. And so who knows what the reason is, but she decided I wasn't important anymore. And she has confessed this as an adult. And to be honest with you, that was one of the most healing moments, was hearing the truth. I just didn't care about you anymore. You know, and wow, that really actually helped, because I was like, I felt that it's real. That is a real confession finally coming out of this woman, right? Finally. She chose herself over kids, and she decided she was going to become a scientist, and she enrolled in every class you could imagine. She's a brilliant woman, really, really smart, capable of way more than what she's doing. And there's still time. Maybe she'll figure it out, but it's not my story, it's hers. So I was kicked out repeatedly, and eventually the court removed me from the home. And the court removed me in a very unceremonious way. It was like, now you're a child and now you are responsible for yourself, and here's the door. It's like, no, it's funny because when we have a child, they don't give us a handbook. There's all of this effort that gets us to the baby getting out, and everybody's prepared for that moment. And the moment you come out into the world, they're like, okay, next baby, bye. And same thing with the court system. It's like, okay, we only have one tool in our tool shed to solve this problem. We're going to remove the kid from the home. But now what? And they asked me if I wanted to go into a group home or a foster home. And I'd already been in those places. I did not want to be in them again. I wanted to be an adult. So I chose adult. And I went out.
I think you already were, though. No, you were.
Yeah, I already kind of was anyway.
The moment you made that phone call, having jumped out of a truck.
I became an adult that day. That's correct. I lost my childhood that day. And part of what you see, this playful person, is because I'm getting to be a kid again. I get to be a child again. And, people can rob you of your childhood, but it's only up to you whether you get it back. And it turns out we're the same exact people we always were. We're just a little wiser. That's all. And
like David Bowie says, we're just taller children.
Yes, we're solar children. We are celestial, I believe, celestial beings. We are balls of energy and light. And I don't believe that there's one path to this. I think Christianity leads to it, Buddhism leads to it, mysticism leads to it, logic leads to it. Believe it or not, BDSM leads to it. Like, I've witnessed multiple different areas where, like, people find something that works, that allows them to relinquish their past and move forward towards a future in which they are a fully integrated whole human being. And so that's the work I've been doing the last 20 years, both consciously and subconsciously, because a lot of times we succumb to life and we forget. We basically become mechanical and we start going about our day mechanically. But there is a life that you can choose, which is a life of intention, which is very different than just sort of responding to life. You get to choose. We have very little we are allowed to control in this life. And you get to control the little things that you can, which is your state of awareness and happiness. You are absolutely in control of your own happiness. What you wear, unless you're in prison, you can choose that. And none of you, I don't think, are in prison yet. So, you can choose your outfit. You can choose how you interface with the world and how you react to things being thrown at you, which is also, you cannot react. That's okay. A lot of people think that we always have to react. And it turns out inaction might be the best thing in the world to do at any given time. I honestly think action should be reserved for, really big actions like what I did in the car, for things that really need to happen. Like in that situation, I had to eject from the car. I felt like I was faced with pure evil. I don't know how else to describe it, you guys. I was like, pure evil is staring me in the face. And right now the universe has called upon me to make a decision that whether a man goes to jail or doesn't go to jail. And I was like, this is a big responsibility and I must tell the truth, which is this man did not hurt me.
It's so interesting. In the moments when I experienced abuse in my life, it also had a kind of mythological thing. Like there's an element to it that's so hard to grasp with your everyday brain that I think we mythologize it. And I also, like, I'm an atheist, but I was like, oh my God, evil, the devil is here. This is hell. And like, you have these really old religious mythological images, and you reject it, you respond to it because you have to respond to evil with rejection. And maybe it's because you in those moments you need to dehumanize your family members or whoever is committing these crimes. And for months after, at least for me, and I would love to hear from the group, it appeared as evil. And it's a really,
I call it darkness.
Or darkness, yes.
Yeah, so I believe I was an atheist too, until recently, probably the last couple of weeks, believe it or not. Now I'm open to the possibility that there's more to this life than we can possibly know. So because I have experienced things once I became happy that are unbelievable. And it could just be serotonin surges. Like I'm always going to be like the science mind and think about human beings as these machines that we really are, that are incredible, but they're still just meat sacks with hormones, right? And so I've been feeling these surges of serotonin over the past couple of weeks, that clearly there was a block in my brain preventing them from reaching me. And as soon as I cleared the cobwebs, yes, I'm here. I am just waking up. That is correct. That is correct. So while people look at me at overcoming adversity, I honestly don't feel I overcame it until the past couple of weeks.
What happened?
So, people assume that I did, but I didn't. All I did was survive. I overcame adversity and survived, but I didn't become a full human being until recently. Like it's amazing to me, because I honestly feel like the number one thing that we can do as human beings is to relieve trauma and suffering, both in ourselves and in other people. But then you can't be an insufferable preacher, right? You can't go around telling people what they have to do. All you can do is be yourself, radiate light, be the happiest you can be, cause as little harm in the world as you can cause. And then people will notice, and they will come to you and ask questions. And when they ask questions, you have a duty and responsibility to answer responsibly. They might not be ready to wake up, as somebody pointed out. Some people aren't ready. They have to get rid of trauma first. This is why I think there are people wandering around that are schizophrenic on the streets, is they may have woken up before they've healed their trauma. They might actually have magical abilities, extrasensory abilities. Some of the things that they're seeing might be very quite real to them. And it's really interesting to me, because I do think that our brains are capable of more than we know, and I'm kind of succumbing to that. And as I succumb to that, relinquishing control over this planet that we were all born into, these bodies we were all born into, allows you to start seeing magic around you that's harmless. So what's the harm in relinquishing control to a belief that things are kind of outside of your control, and you are just an agent of change fighting darkness and light? Like Star Wars gives us the answer. The answers are in everything. It's really interesting, because it was like the answers were here all along. They were in every book, every fable, and I almost just like wanted to like not hurt myself, but you know what I mean, like kind of just punch myself. Yes, I'm an agent of light. Interestingly,
I love it so much. This should be the title of your memoirs when you write them.
Yeah, I'm writing it now. I figured out how to start it. I figured out how to end it. It all came to me, and it's almost like it's writing through me as a vessel. I don't know how else to describe it, but I believe I'm a lighthouse. I'm a light worker. My job is to enlighten other people around me and help them find their inner light. And light is just pure joy and happiness. It's all it is. But remember, you can go to the store and get an ice cream cone and feel a moment of pure joy and happiness. You can't mistake it for the real thing. It's just a Band-Aid.
And what happened in the past couple of weeks? That was it just a combination of this really long period of work, or?
Yeah, basically I was faced with some more suffering. Patricia put something in the universe that I had to respond to. She started doting on my sister, my adult sister, and started sending her gifts. Our birthdays are 18 days apart. And my sister got on Facebook and said, "My mommy loves me," and started posting all these pictures. And then I waited for my birthday to come around, and I heard nothing from either of them. And I realized what they were doing. And I started spiraling down. And I was like, all those thoughts, I'm worthless. My mother doesn't love me. She doesn't care about me. She's never going to care about me. She's using this poor injured soul of a sister as a vessel of pain because my brother and I haven't heard from her. So clearly, like, there's intention behind this evil. Like, she intends to stab a stake through my heart. And I realized I deleted her from my phone. I deleted her from my life. I deleted her from my mind. I call her Patricia now. I refuse to call her mom. I slip up every now and then because the person who gave birth to you, it's a pattern. You've met my mom. My mom is a beautiful woman in Belgium.
I met her. She's incredible.
Who, you know, as a teenager lifted me up and basically told me I was worth more. And it was the biggest gift. And to be honest with you, that's all we can do in life, is to remind people that they're worth more. She was an angel when I needed one. And she told me that I have so much more in me and so much power in me. She told me all the things that nobody ever told me in my life, you know, that I had to tell myself. And now I believe them, which is different. The thing is, like, you can hear these things and you're like, oh, but you need to examine them. When someone says you're beautiful and you shy away, what does that mean? And now nothing has changed about me. I'm not wearing makeup. I'm not dressing differently. As a matter of fact, I'm dressing like a hippie hobo. And people walk up to me now and they're like, you're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in the world. And I'm like, it's not me. It's a reflection of you. People see what they want inside of them. So it's really interesting because because my light is shining, people flock to me like moths to a flame. And all of these moths have a little bit of sadness in them. And all of them have asked the question, there's got to be more to life than this. And then they see someone who's living more to this life. And they're like, they've got it figured out. But the problem is, I can't tell people a magical word. I can't tell them what book to read. I can only say, these books, these movies had an impact on me. But once you make the choice to be the captain of your ship, the narrator of your boat, I can tell you that you become the lightest, freest, happiest person you can even imagine. And then Patricia doesn't matter. The stories we tell ourselves just don't fucking matter. They just don't. So actually, I'm having a really hard time writing my story right now because I can't even identify with it. And so it's really interesting because I'm like, wow, that person existed. So now I've changed the tone of my book. Before I was writing it as the injured child. And now I'm writing it as if some wiser voice is talking to me and telling me what my life was. And then eventually I'm going to kill it off because it's gone. Like what I do today, I set my intentions now every day. And I'm like, today I'm going to do an hour of light work. And I do an hour or half an hour of light work every day. And what that looks like varies by the day. The past couple of days, I've been giving away excess coffee mugs on the street. I put a sign out that says free mugs. And I put all the mugs that I want to get rid of there. And I've been delightfully watching people examine them and read them and decide if they have meaning or not, you know, and they take them home. And maybe they're like, that was a kind gesture. And when they drink their coffee from that mug, maybe they feel that kindness and they remember that moment where somebody gave them a free mug. And that's all light work is. It's not hard, you know, and so, or you go out and you pay attention to the world and maybe you might be an angel in the right place at the right time and you might save someone's life. But it's basically showing up for life. And so now I'm more alive than I've ever been. And so I'm so thankful. I actually am happy we're recording this because I would much rather that people saw it if they're seeking it. If you reach out to me and ask me how, I don't know if I can give you any answers. All I can tell you is to keep asking questions.
Thank you so much. I think this is the right moment to actually
ask questions.
Ask the audience to ask questions. Please, guys, if you know how to raise your hand, it's under reactions, and then you click on raise your hand. But so my plan, I have a couple of like follow-up questions that are more about like the methodology and how resilience works and how this light is found for those who may be still struggling with this. But I would prefer to open the floor first to hear Probably the audience has much better questions than me. So those questions. So yeah, guys, just raise your hands and I will go around. Or if you have a comment, maybe you don't have a question, you have a comment.
Oh, Tom is raising his hand, I think.
Tom, hello.
Hi,
We've
Tom.
heard so much about you. Do you have video?
Hi.
Hi.
I have my video off. I'll turn it on for a
hey.
second.
Hi, Tom. It's Tom.
Hi.
Hello. Hello, lovely
It's been
human.
wonderful to hear you talk about this, Cyan.
Yeah.
So like what I want to ask you to do is talk a little bit more about curiosity and you know, like how curiosity and maybe other factors helped you navigate this situation when you were young and get your life on track. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So everything, thank you, Tom. And thank you for asking me one of the most pivotal questions in my life. I went around and basically everything that got thrown my way. When you're surviving, you have to react. You have to trust your gut. So if anything, I have an amazingly tuned gut where I know how to respond in a situation that will ensure my survival and the people's survival around me. And by survival, I mean roof over our heads, food, our bare necessities. But then I started wondering, like, why do people do what they do? You know, and then you start realizing that we place a script. I think you were talking about scripts earlier, but we place a narrative over the person. I've always tried different narratives. A really great example is of questioning a narrative is I thought Tom was an old man when I first met him. I applied for a job at this company and he wrote back to me and it was so succinct and so mature and grown up that he couldn't possibly be my age. I thought he was 60, 70 years old. So when I came in and interviewed and saw someone my age, I was blown away. And I think the other thing is being open to being wrong. So curiosity leads to lots of pointing out how wrong you are. And then you become very comfortable with being wrong, which I think is important. Our identities are so tied up with being wrong that a lot of people act out of that fear. And so they become pessimists. It's so easy to be wrong all the time. I mean, you can literally say no all day long and you will just like be wrong all the time. Or you can be open to the possibility of yes, which is, you know, the truth is out there somewhere. And so when you start to think about things in less absolutes, I think is where you start to discover there's a lot of wiggle room to love other people, even the ones you think you hate. So you'll see me on Twitter all the time talking to people that people find reprehensible. And I also have loved people that are reprehensible because I seek to understand what it is about them that might need to be fixed. I can't fix it. They have to fix it. All I can do is provide them love and a beacon of hope. And maybe they'll remember me in their darkest time. And maybe they'll choose the light over the darkness next time. But I think curiosity opens you up to the possibility that you'll figure it out, I guess. You know, if you're closed and if you tell yourself a narrative that I can't figure this out, I am not smart enough. Curiosity is only good for the mind and the heart, if that makes any sense. And so I always chose the curious path, which is where does this road go? You know, let's drive down it. And I think you've known me long enough, Tom, that I've always been kind of what people would call impulsive. But it's not impulsive. It's I want to see what's down that road. I want to see where it goes, you know? And some people are like, I don't understand. And they try to quantify it. They're like, you know, I can't tell you the number of times people have told me about like sunken costs and waste of my time and I don't need to be doing that. Or, you know, is that a good use of my energy? Only you know what is a good use of your energy. When people tell you like you must listen to those words because those are commands. And whether you choose to follow the commands is your choice. When you hear the word, you must, you need to go to church. You need to go to school. You need to be a woman, and this is what women look like. You need this. You need to buy this shit. It's going to make you happy. Turns out you don't need any of that shit. So hopefully that answers your question, Tom. I don't know if it does or not. This is like coming up out of my stream of consciousness, but hopefully that helps. I'm going to go to another question.
No, that's cool.
No, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Well, I feel like what you're saying is that like you were open to the possibility that you would discover something interesting even when everything else was bad.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
There's a lesson everywhere. That's correct. If you believe that there's a lesson everywhere, you find them under every stone you turn. And the lessons could be things like, oh, I was too inebriated to take this phone call and be a conscious adult and take care of this child when they were having, maybe I need to make a rule that I don't smoke weed when I'm watching children, for example. You know what I mean? Like maybe there's certain things that you have to rewire where you're like, okay, lesson learned, and then you integrate it into your life. A good example of this is I made a bet with myself earlier this week that I really wanted to eat this bag of gummy worms really bad. And then I looked at the serving and it was like 5 gummy worms. And I'm like, okay, I ate 5. And then I was like, I'm going to see if I have any self-control. An hour later, I wanted 5 more. So then I made a deal with myself, which was fine, have the whole bag. But if you do, you can never have a gummy worm again. And then I thought about it for a moment and I was like, you know what? They're not good for me. I ate the whole bag. Guess what? I can never do again. And when you make the word never with yourself, you've got to stick to it because the one person that you owe everything in the world to is yourself. So I'm going to be fine without ever having a gummy worm. And someone might be having the best gummy worm of their life and I may feel like I'm missing out, but we all know it's just calories and sugar and I can go get those from another source. It's more of a lesson. So everything we do is a lesson. And I think if we choose to look at it that way and with boundless curiosity and what can I get out of it and what can I integrate into myself, then I believe we can become better human beings. And that's all we can do is just be good people, for crying out loud. That's all we can do.
I love it. And one of the things that your pursuit of curiosity reminds me of, there's this fantastic description of depression, which is that depression is constant present. So you envision the world as something fixed and something that has concluded, and it's kind of like weighing on you. Mm-hmm. Curiosity is rejecting that and saying, okay, so this is now, what's next? What's the next moment? And one of the, I remember kind of in my own journey, there was this moment maybe 8 years ago when I read Maria Konikova's article. I think I sent it to you in the New Yorker, 2014. She profiled this American psychologist called Norman Garmezi. And Garmezi basically spent the 20th century researching resilience in children. He didn't start that way. He first researched so-called problem children, like what are the factors that will make a 13, 14-year-old the most likely to drop out of school, and then substance abuse, incarceration, et cetera, all of those terrible patterns. But as he was doing his research, at some point he realized that, okay, that's really interesting, but what's more interesting is that 25%, 1 in 4 of these kids does not drop out of school, does not start substance abuse, does graduate, get a job, they find a spouse, they have a family. What's happening in those kids? Is there an algorithm for resilience? And I remember just kind of like crying when I was reading the article on my phone, because there are these factors that these kids do, and you were just talking about them. One is seeing everything as a trial and a lesson. Okay, I have a difficulty. What can I learn? How can I solve it? But also the picking out of mentors. I don't have anybody to talk to. You think, But no, because you're a resilient kid. You go
mentorship is everywhere. Mentorship can be a bee on a plant.
Absolutely. Oh my God. But because you think like I have no one to talk to. This is what maybe a highly, endangered child would think. But the resilient kid says, oh, but there's a psychiatrist. And I call them and I say to the psychiatrist, who is the person to talk to that I don't have anybody to talk to, which is something I've done a lot of times, but you do, like you're already talking to them. And that's also curiosity, not just taking your bundle of humans that you were kind of dealt in the lottery of life that is completely random, like these are your parents, goodbye. No, you're like going and finding new adults to help you.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did. I actually found different adults. So we've got some hand raises, but yeah, I found different adults, and I chose different parents, and I chose different leaders, and I chose basically the whole family you choose and the family you have is real. You can take the family members out of your life that you feel are good people, and you can discard the ones that you feel are not serving you anymore. And there's nothing wrong with it. They've got to fix their own shit and you can't fix it for them.
Absolutely. And I do think that, the nuclear family kind of makes it more difficult, right? And especially today, this whole removal of children and adults who are not biologically related and kind of criminalizing so much of that makes it even more difficult. Because, when you live together with your godmother and your aunts and your uncles, like there were more people to choose from. And in many, many societies, which one was actually your biological parent didn't even matter. Like there were the adults and you could choose.
I would have much rather there was other family members I could have been with, for sure, if that was on the table, but it wasn't on the table.
Well, you did it anyway, and that's remarkable. And we will talk a little bit more about mentors, whether there is a question about that or not in the audience. I'm going to go to Cynthia first, and then Megan.
Okay.
Great to see you, Megan, by the way. This is awesome. I love to see new faces and also familiar faces. It's always a beautiful combination at Interintellect.
Hi, I'm Cynthia. I first just wanted to thank you so much for the past hour. You took me through just like a wild wave of emotions. It was vulnerable and raw, and yeah, just super, super grateful to have space with you. I guess my question is, I'm really curious about how you think about fear, like what your relationship with fear is. Does it serve a purpose? Is it, just like where have you kind of come to in life with that?
Fear can be useful, and it can also be very detrimental to you. So the types of fear are useful, the ones that save you from an oncoming car that's about to hit you. The ones that actually save your life. And those are the types of fear that you want to hone, which are real, which is sensing the world around you and whether or not you're physically safe in it. The other is sensing the world around you to see whether or not you're energetically safe in it, which is a different thing, which is if I go out into the world, is my mind, body, and spirit in the right place to interact with potential negativity that is coming my way? And am I resilient enough for it? Fear, the rest of it is I believe, a message to you to examine what that fear is. There's a lesson in there, and what we resist persists. So if you fear speaking in front of the public, maybe you need to speak in front of the public and overcome that fear. If you fear singing, maybe you need to sing more, or analyze, where does that even come from? Where does the root go down into? And what you'll discover usually is something in childhood, something someone told you, or even worse, a narrative about yourself that you need to fix, which is, I am not a good speaker. I cannot talk in front of people. I'm not smart enough. What I have to say, nobody wants to hear. That's just one example. Or it could be, I'm afraid of traveling. I'm afraid of going into places with lots of people. Maybe it's your sensory stuff is you're not aligned with it. And you're like, I can't handle being around lots of people. What does that mean? How can I handle it? Or should I not? Should I just avoid these spaces because they actually harm me? And I think that's how I approach fear, because there's a line in Dune that's always stuck with me. It's fear is the mind killer. Let it pass through you and over you. And it's just totally true. which is a lot of people look at me as fearless, but it's not true. We all have fear. I just deal with it in a different way. So that's what I would do. Like, just maniacally analyze, if you're fearful, where does it come from? And what can you do mentally inside to rewire your brain to fix it? Because that's the real challenge, I think. I'm not an expert, but I'm just figuring it out. Thank you.
The generative fear, right? What is a
Yeah.
fear that will drive you to make better choices, and what is the debilitating fear that actually stops you from doing what you should be doing?
Correct.
Does it feel different to you guys, both Cynthia and Cyan, these two types of fear? Sometimes we find, little hormonal cues between, joy and joy, like you mentioned, Cyan. Like, there's a difference between finding serenity in life and enjoying a good, cup of ice cream. Does the distinction to you guys exist between fear and fear as well?
I think so.
Yeah, totally. Thank you. That was very thoughtful.
Thank you so much. Megan?
Hey, thank you so much, Cyan, for taking the time to share your story. It was really inspiring, and you're really a beacon of hope for a life of agency. I have a question around, so I watched this video that that Anna sent out where you were giving a talk at like a TechCrunch Disrupt or something about your story. And I thought it was really interesting that you said that you started listening to electronic music at some stage because you wanted to figure out what you actually believe, because a lot of the punk lyrics were like feeding you ideas about how to look at issues in the world. I thought that was like really an apt thing to do. And I'm wondering, like, if you could share a little bit about practices you have for continually ensuring that you have an environment where you can think for yourself, because it can sometimes be drowning to hear, everybody saying one thing about a certain world issue. Like, so it's awesome that you're able to think for yourself so much. I'm just wondering what kind of practice you have to ensure that that's so possible.
I'm still figuring out some of it because I'm having a hard time now that my mind has shifted. Doom scrolling, all of those various things. Like, I start reading things and I'm like, oh man, that just doesn't matter. And you start realizing like all these patterns that people have are playing out in front of you. And then you start seeking people who are thinking differently. And you actually start tuning out that life. It's really, I don't know how else to describe it. And some people might say you feel absent or you're really happy, but you've disappeared. So some people make the conscious decision to absorb less information. And they're going to experience a level of elatedness and happiness as a result, because we're just not throwing all this stuff at us all the time. But then there's a big difference between doing it and then knowing you're doing it. So like, that's now, I'm a little more impatient. Like, I'll be walking around with friends and they'll start going on and on and on about some girl in high school, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. And I have to what I'm learning right now is patience, because I don't want to be one of these insufferable people that acts like I've got it all figured out, because I don't, because the impatience is a lesson, right? For me, which is to sit there and remember that that person has not discovered their light, and, that they need to find their patience and they need to find their light, and they're just children searching just like me. And so, I am learning to breathe and be calm in those moments, because, I think they're important moments both for them and for me to see how I react to it. Because if I say, hey, have you ever thought about what it might be like to not care about what happened with that girl in high school? Have you ever thought about what your life might be like if you let that go? What you might feel like? The other things I play with are, that was a very pivotal, I'm glad that you got that message. It's really interesting to me what people get from that speech, because I very specifically put lessons in there to see whether or not people got them. And I feel like you are the first to understand. I just want you to know that the first to understand the shirt analogy I put in there and the punk rock music, because I really felt like I was signaling to the world that I was part of a tribe. And I was attracting what I was putting out there, which was all this negativity, dystopia, life is coming to a ruin, people are powerful and they have too much power and all this sort of stuff. And I was basically projecting that into the world, and I was attracting like. When I started listening to electronic music, I started wearing happier clothes and started writing my own internal narrative about what the music meant. And I'm now experimenting with clothes, which I think would be a really fun thing for other people to experiment with, which is how much of what we wear do we wear for ourselves, or do we wear for other people, or don't care at all? Really analyzing why you wear what you wear and why you buy what you buy is a really fascinating rabbit hole to go down. And right now I'm exploring that rabbit hole. And I realized I have a lot of clothes. I've shopped a lot in my life. Where does that come from? And I've made up all these stories about it. From, I really, really like, craftsmen. I really, really like people's sewing abilities. I really, really like different textiles and fabrics. These are all true. But I also was scratching an itch that was not healed inside of me. And I was searching for novelty. Once you start realizing this, you're like, okay, well, how can I create novelty in my life that is a more healthy version of novelty? So now I go to the mall and I plant literally Elon Musk Easter eggs all over the mall. And then I sit around and watch people find them. Again, all of a sudden I'm like, well, I get the novelty I'm craving. I get to have the drink at the mall that I was looking forward to. And now I'm watching people going around looking through bushes for Elon Musk heads, and I was like, this is fantastic. See, every day every experience you have, you can choose in that moment to turn it into a place of magic or a place of mundaneness. And you can give to people or you can take. And the thing is, I choose giving more energy to the world rather than taking as much as I could take. And so, I think those are things to analyze. Like, again, everything is a lesson. Hopefully that helps. But basically, everything's a lesson. Play with it all. Like every insecurity you have, everything you do automatically. Like if you're just like, I wake up in the morning and the first thing I do is reach my phone. Why? How come you don't stop and breathe and look at the sky? And remember, we have this earth that we all live on that hasn't gone away. It's still there. And it's filled with magic and wonder. And we literally live in heaven. But it's just whether or not we choose to see it. And I don't mean in the biblical heaven. I mean in the, we are an anomaly. We are so special in the realm of the universe and universes that we even have life, that we can even sit here on this Zoom call and have these conversations is a miracle within itself, right? Totally.
Big heart energy. I love it. And can you let us know when you're doing the Elon Musk hunting?
Yes. So I'm going to tweet about it.
This is something I'm interested in, not just theoretically. I would definitely love to try it.
I thought about getting rid of my Twitter, but now that Elon might own it, I'm not going to, because the whole reason that I was going to leave was I really felt that it was heading in this monoculture direction that was not celebrating the diversity of thought. And again, valuing thoughts that are not your own, that you don't hold, that you abhor, is actually important. And so, because it challenges your ability to be a better person, to take the high road when somebody's telling you the nastiest thing you've ever heard. Do you say, you asshole, you terrible person? Do you back them into a corner? Do you turn up and amplify their victim mentality, or do you turn it down? We each have this choice. And that's why I think Twitter being a freer place is actually better for humanity. And so because it's better for humanity, I might stay. But if it continues to not be a good source of goodness in the world, then I can't participate. I have to figure out another way, because it's just not good for my energy, and I only have so much of it. And I figured, well, if Twitter won't choose the right path, then I'll start writing longer posts I'll start doing videos. I'm not going to shut up. That's never going to happen. If people are worried about me leaving Twitter, I'm not going to shut up. It's just that there's other ways that I can express myself and reach more people.
Please don't ever shut up. If you're looking to do good in the world, you need to talk. We need to hear you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for being like the lighthouse too. I love this way of phrasing it. And you reminded me to always try to bring more magic. I was calling my apartment the Enchanted Forest to be like this retreat that I could go back to.
Yeah.
Everything could be just a little bit like sparkly and
oh yeah, your home should be so intentional. It should be a place of calm and comfort and all of and it should embody your ideals and values, I think. So this is a suggestion. May I suggest that everybody here, when you see a lighthouse in the wild, that you stop and you take a moment and you think, what is that lighthouse trying to tell me right now? And find totems like that bring you joy in random places. So I have songs that if I hear in the wild, I stop and pay attention. I now have totems, if you will. If I see them, I'm like, oh, that's right, I'm a lighthouse. And it's basically little things that remind you of who you are. And they're all in the world. There's no harm in thinking that a bee reminds you to wake up. So every time you see a bee on a bush, it could be a lesson. So just basically, I really think living in more intentionally, even like I am going to get up and brush my teeth right now until you automatically start brushing your teeth in the morning, and then you can stop that exercise mentally. But I think that you'll notice that sometimes you're browsing the fridge when you shouldn't be, because you didn't intend for it to be browsing the fridge. Is the art on your wall intentional, or did you impulsively buy it? If you impulsively bought it, was it in Europe? Then reassign a new meaning to it. So that when somebody asks you why you have that painting on your wall, you say, well, I got it in Europe with my friend Tom, and it reminds me of that. And if it's something you bought at IKEA because you're like, I need art on the wall, maybe take it down. And I think that's where I love the fact that you have your happy forest. I'm building a lighthouse, an actual physical lighthouse in Southern California, and I'm going to start putting up little lighthouses in various places. And because I believe that's what I am. I'm a source of light for the weary traveler. But you might be something else. There's different things. Once you figure out what you are, you might be a mystical forest elf. You might be a wizard. You might be a timekeeper. You might be like, who knows what you are? Maybe you haven't discovered it yet. But I think we all live. I think muggles are just people who haven't woken up. I think that J.K. Rowling was actually onto something. So. And totally. The muggles are asleep. We can't harm them.
Thank you so much. This is so interesting to find basically sacred objects in the world or phenomena, and kind of trust the universe that you will keep coming across them. And that's a moment of reflection, and they're almost like meditation prompts.
Yeah, when someone dies, like for example, Tony Hsieh, I don't know if you guys know who he is. He was a dear friend of mine. He was the CEO of Zappos and helped revitalize downtown Las Vegas. And he passed in a horrific, maybe accident, who knows, but he loved llamas. And so every time I see a llama, I say, hi, Tony. All llamas are named Tony now to me. And it's funny because we must be in the year of llamas are in fashion, because like every card store, Tony is everywhere. And
I just watched a documentary of llamas like a couple of days ago, and that never happened before.
Yeah, but Tony is everywhere, and you didn't know Tony, but all you have to do is look at a llama and smile, and guess what? You know Tony. So again, every llama that you see, you can now see Tony Hsieh. And if you want to see Tony Hsieh, you can go on Google and listen to all of his talks and see what a beautiful human being he was. But Tony Hsieh's not gone. Tony Hsieh lives in llamas. And now every llama I see, I just think of him And people randomly give me llamas and I'm like, oh, thanks, Tony. You know, and I choose to decide that it's Tony speaking to me. Who cares if it's right or wrong? Who cares if it's scientific or not? It doesn't matter. You know, I'm not harming anybody. And as a matter of fact, it helps heal my soul, which is I miss Tony deeply. And I feel like his life was cut too short and he had more important work to do. But he wrote a book called Delivering Happiness. And I think that should tell you everything about how unhappy he was. So people who try to tell you that they have all of the answers in a book are not truly happy themselves. That's one of the things I've discovered. So if you're seeking happiness, it's not in a book that someone tells you that the recipes are all in there.
Same goes for Twitter. Like Twitter accounts where every tweet is telling you how this person has figured out and you haven't. Probably.
Probably has not. I have found happiness for myself. I can truly say that, but I cannot say that I know at all what each individual's path is to find it for themselves. All I can do is just share how I got to where I am. That's it. But you know what? There's more people like us. I'm not alone. And once you wake up, you start to see them. And you're like, oh, they're teachers, doctors, nurses, actors, scientists. And sometimes, believe it or not, duck boat drivers, narrators in Boston. Like, you'd be amazed at where these enlightened people are, but they're everywhere.
Thank you so much. Any other questions from the audience about lighthouses, mentors hiding in plain sight, or too much self-care coming in from people who need self-care themselves?
I might be the only VC you ever hear talk like this. There's a lot of unhappy VCs out there who tell themselves that they're not good. You know, they got the one big deal that they wanted, and now they've got it. They're like, crap, I get the next one. They're on these hamster wheels of despair.
You don't have to think about yourself, right? Because it's kind of a cyclical greed that renews in every season, the same as in show business where I grew up. And it's great because one cycle is gone, one trend is gone, and then you're immediately on the next one. And you can encounter people in their 60s, 70s who never had a moment to stop and think because they made sure that there would not be that moment.
Correct. We make sure that we don't have these moments by allowing ourselves to continue to suffer. When you continue to suffer, and suffering comes into, I'm sorry. Like when somebody does something and you're like, I'm sorry. Guess what? It all adds up. It all adds up. It's like little paper cuts and it all adds up.
I agree. Any questions from you guys about this or any comments?
Here's a question. Could you share a bit more about your and others you've heard experience of finding your light?
From Christoph in the chat for those watching us.
So I've been reading about others. I didn't even realize this was possible until I found my light, to be honest with you. I was reading philosophy. And in the philosophy books, I kept finding little nuggets that kind of made sense, but not completely. And it wasn't until that moment happened with Patricia where I realized I have a choice to make in this moment to fall down into the pits of hell or to rise up and be who I know I'm meant to be. And that's when the light came in. It was hard to explain, but the only thing that I have read that even comes close is something called a Kundalini awakening or Kundalini. I don't know how you even pronounce it. I just read it. Kundalini. Yeah, a Kundalini awakening, where it feels like the base of your skull, this light just sort of emanates out of your head and then throughout your entire body. And for about a week or two, I was walking around in Boston. I decided to go immerse myself in a foreign place around people that I didn't know and walk among them, which was really challenging. I went to the finals game of the Warriors versus the Celtics while I was having this awakening. And it was so bizarre and so magical because I saw how asleep we really are. And I was walking around like I was in a sea of sleep. And what was really interesting was, as I was looking out, there were other people looking up and looking out of the sleep. And they would wander over to me and we would have these conversations, and I would discover that that person died 4 years ago, you know, has an artificial heart. Usually what you discover is that these people who are awake have overcome crazy adversity. Or some realize that they had no adversity in their lives and they're not guilty for that. So one of the things we're experiencing in this world right now is a bunch of people who feel like they have had no suffering and have lived a life of privilege, feel guilty because they didn't suffer and didn't live a life that was hard. And so now they're self-sabotaging themselves. We see eating disorders, cutting, and these are people who grew up in lives where everything was handed to them. And so what you're seeing is there's one way to handle oppression, which is to accept it, to heal from it, to move on, to make it right. And then the other is to turn that oppression around and start oppressing other people. And I think that right now we're in a cycle where people are oppressing other people and lashing out and basically pointing fingers, rather than taking responsibility and self-accountability and radical self-actualization, which is where we need to get to. So, and need is an actual real word there, like humanity depends on it. So some of the work that I want to do is to try to help more people find that light, especially people in inner cities who are experiencing the most horrific things. These kids that have gone through school shootings, that feel like this world has gone to shit in a handbasket and don't realize how much better this world is than it was in medieval times, for example. We really, really, really need to help these kids see this light that's inside of them somehow. And so that's my mission in life now, is to try to figure that out. And right now it looks like spreading little Elon Musks, creating little treasure chests that I put treasures in for kids to find. It looks like things like that. But I am thinking about how to do it on a grander scale because of my job. I invest in companies. I invested in companies that have reshaped the world. And so because I have access to this, I feel like it's my responsibility now when I invest, or even in my own investments, to come in and say, hey, could we do this a little differently? Can we still be profitable, but have game mechanics that lift people up rather than tear them down? Do we really have to have an us versus them game mechanic? What if it's all of us against something that's unseen? You know, so I'm starting to rephrase even the advice that I give founders, because I feel like it's very incremental and we all have our own little shard that we're supposed to hold up and try, like we're all little superheroes, you know, and we're fighting darkness, and darkness is just pure ego. That's all it is. Darkness is everything is for me. Everything is for I. You all serve me. You work for me. I utilize you. I use you. That's dark work. And so those are the people you have to watch out for or try to change. And you can only change them through example. So hopefully that helps. But I can tell you that when you find your light, it's unmistakable. You feel like something that you've been missing your whole life is finally there. And I wouldn't try to rush it. It could happen now. It could happen when you're 45, which is my age. It could happen when you're 65. It could happen on your deathbed. But just know it's gonna happen, because life is gonna throw you immeasurable suffering. People you love are gonna die. And you're gonna be thrown into the pits of hell. And how you choose to rise up out of that pit is what really matters. Like recently, my son went to the hospital. He has allergies. And because I'm in this state, I handled it in a very different way. I didn't panic. I didn't cause him more trauma. And instead I was like, oh, it's good that this is happening right now, because we get to learn what the hospital system is like you get to learn how to navigate the world if you have an emergency and I'm not around. You know, and so I started pointing out things to him. I had a role to play as a teacher in that moment. Like, that is a paramedic. That is a firefighter. We are in this room. They do this in this room. They do this. And instead of me being like, you know, I was like, I have a choice right now to teach my child how to navigate the world, or I can be freaking the fuck out. And I kept, in order to do that, I had to advocate for my own needs. I told the paramedic, do you have water? I don't want to be your patient. You know, and that's the other thing, is like remembering that you don't want to be the patient, because you can't save anyone if your body is not in order. So that's the other thing, is we mind workers forget about our body. Like, we're so cerebral, we're in our minds all the time, that we forget that we have these meat vessels and we have to take care of them. So in an emergency, it is not wrong to want a bottle of water. So advocate for it. And guess what? People will bring it to you. They're like, yes, please don't become a patient. We do not need you falling apart. So that's the big thing, is don't fall apart.
I love this. And also this added gratitude that, you know, we are not in the medieval times. We get to go to a hospital. We are in the 20th century, and most of us are lucky to, you know, live in places where it kind of works. And if you have an allergy, this is a solvable problem. And there are, you know, there's an army of professionals who get paid to do this for you. So there's also, I love this. This is absolutely beautiful. And I didn't know about this condom. I write a lot about when I was 12, I had this experience when I always describe it that my skull opened and this light came out, but I didn't know it had a name.
Yeah.
I just call it an epiphany, and
I think there's different kinds of experiences. The gentleman who pronounced it might actually know more about this, because I don't know much. I just know that I started searching for a light is emanating out of my head, help. And then all of a sudden I found this community of people who are like, lights are emanating out of my head.
I have to.
And then I was like, okay, this is normal. I am not weird. I am walking around and everybody appears to be asleep. I went and started searching on Google, and I found other people who had the same phenomenon. Sometimes it doesn't last forever. Sometimes it lasts 2 to 3 weeks. If you want to stay in that state, you have to do very, very deep work. And you also have to give up things that you might not be ready to give up. And so I've decided I'm comfortable at this vibration for a little while, because there's certain things I don't want to give up yet. But there's things that are material. There are things that are whatever that you kind of have to let go of in order to vibrate at that level. And it takes a lot of energy out of you. So if you do have an awakening, don't be surprised if you sleep for a week, and let yourself. It's okay. You're not depressed. You're the happiest you've ever been. So go to sleep.
Oh, I love this. I will definitely Google light coming out of my head. I always say people who may be, you know, reading stuff I write, I always said that kind of, I am the person who came into existence on that day. So if this was, I mean, I was 12, so that was a long time ago. But if this has happened to you now, you know, maybe everything is starting now, and, you know, all these amazing adventures are awaiting you.
You'll know when it happens, because air feels different, sun feels different, everything feels different, and birds are special and squirrels are special, and you're like, wow, like it's all inside of us, you know, and then you're just like, wow, it was here the whole time. You're just blinded to it, quite literally.
Another good word is grace, right? It's grace you're describing. Is that a bad word?
Was what?
Grace.
Which one?
A little bit like being in light is also a bit like, at least to me.
Yeah, no, gray I think is a good place to be.
Gray, like in a state of grace.
Yeah, gray it's a delicate balance. Sometimes we need a little darkness to get to the light. So sometimes you need to allow yourself to go through the suffering in order to relieve it. And so it's a delicate balance where you're walking on this line where if you go too far into the light, you become potentially schizophrenic and mentally ill, where you allow yourself to just be in that state far longer than your body is capable of handling it. So what it is it's understanding that mental line and maintaining that balance between happiness and sorrow. And You can allow yourself to go too far into the happiness, and then you're just eating ice cream. I keep using that analogy because it's just really, really apt, which is a lot of people mistake happiness for ice cream, and then they're like, and then they think there's a payoff. They're like, I'm going to eat this ice cream. I'm going to go to this music festival. I'm going to go to Burning Man, and I'm going to be a different person when I arrive and when I leave. Maybe you are, and maybe it does change you because you had that outlook and you were more open to the change. But maybe you're just having fun.
It's a pleasure, right? And pleasure fills you up, and eventually.
And there's nothing wrong with just having fun.
Yeah.
But admit it. Just admit it. Like, we set the intention to have fun. We're going to have fun. And it's an intentional fun. And there's nothing wrong with intentional fun. It's when you decide, oh, I'm just gonna stay one more night, one more. Then it falls into gluttony. Then you're just eating all the ice cream and then some, right? Then you're a hedonist. But I think there's a certain amount of joy and pleasure and all of these sorts of things that reminds us we're alive. So we shouldn't deny ourselves those things. We should just be responsible about them.
I love this. And it's interesting how happiness seems so infinite. The light is infinite, whereas when it's just pleasure, it kind of has an expiry date. Like on ice cream, there's only a certain amount of ice cream.
There's a last bite, then it's over. And then you question your decision. And, why not just have 3 bites and be like, ooh, because what's the difference? There's really none, which is like, I went too far and I had a bite and I experienced ice cream. It doesn't fill you up. What really fills you up is a state of being and a state of mind. And that you can sustain forever. It's ice cream forever.
Eric has an interesting comment in the chat. Eric, do you want to jump in?
Sure. Hi.
Hi.
Hello, everyone. So,
Hello.
Cyan, I wanted to say thank you for being so brave in all the things that you talked about. I feel like you took us through this journey where we touched on so many things, and I think I'll be processing that for a while. Yeah, so I just wanted to say that. I feel like there's a lot that I want to say, but it's I couldn't quite articulate it.
Can you tell us the story behind the painting behind you?
That is a puzzle, actually.
Oh, it's a puzzle.
My wife and I did when, we were both home. I was working from home and she was at home, sort of kind of COVID related, right? Just because of the circumstances. Just I was working at home and then she had left her job, basically. So we put it together and we just stuck it on the wall. But we had a really fun time putting together, and we became really engaged with it, where we couldn't stop. We were like, let's just put in one more piece before we go to sleep. And then we ended up finishing it that night.
That's awesome. I love that. That's really, and it's also beautiful because it shows how you can get through a struggle like COVID when you're shut in and finding a beautiful thing to collaborate on and build. And now you have this memory. It's really beautiful. Thank you. I love that.
I think it's kind of like what you said about there being a lesson in everything. I guess it's kind of retconning, right? I don't necessarily think that there is a lesson in everything, that there was some God or some master of the universe that intended a lesson, but I think there's value and meaning that we can pull out of things. And if we're on the lookout for that, then life can be more rich.
Correct. I think, again, everybody has their levels of, I was a hardcore atheist for a long, long time. And I believed absolutely that there was no God. But when I started realizing how wrong I was about so many other things, I started realizing, well, maybe I'm wrong about that. And when I opened up the possibility that maybe I'm wrong about that, I started opening up more possibilities of, well, maybe they really do talk to dead animals. How do I know? I've never talked to a dead animal, but that doesn't mean it's not possible, or that they might not realize that they may think it's so real that it may as well be real to them, and And so it's a loving place to be rather than liar, like, because then you're othering, and
Yeah.
I think it's better to be like, okay, well, is it causing anybody harm? Then that's when you're like, maybe there's charlatans out there who are charging people money and preying on their, but if there's a person out there talking to dead animals for free and not charging any money, then maybe they really aren't hurting anybody. It's the people that claim that they have these gifts and use it to enrich themselves and become, manipulators of it, that I think maybe perhaps the jury's still out on that. I haven't decided, but I definitely have gone from a absolutely no God to, I don't know, there is this thing called happiness. And I know that all the religions seem to lead to it. So maybe they're okay. Maybe some of them, there's some truth. And as long as people get that truth and they find their happiness in it, as long as they're not seeking to enslave people or cause suffering or take away rights. I mean, the organized religion, I think, can be perverted and can create great suffering, as we've seen, which is why some of us become atheists, because we're like, well, that doesn't seem moral. I think a lot of atheists are way more moral than we give them credit for. Because I think we have to find it within ourselves, right? To be good people. We don't rely on God.
I think a lot of atheists are anti-religion or anti-organized religion more than anti-spiritual. I think it's two different categories that we kind of dump into this one category. And I also find a lot of morality in people who are just trying to say, you don't have to belong to a church to be a good person, and thinking that, people outside your congregation are less moral than you is in itself a less moral stance.
Right.
If you accept that everybody is a child of God. One interesting thing that you guys happened upon, and I think COVID made this so painfully clear, is that there's a huge difference between finding a lesson in something that genuinely sucks versus almost in a teleological way trying to find a goal in something. And people are like, oh, actually, COVID was good because I got to spend more time with my kids, is a completely different thing. Like, COVID was terrible and it was really hard on my kids, but there was a silver lining that we at least got. Like, it to me, it feels more less filled with kind of a denial and more healthy to say there are things in life that are genuinely bad, and if we could choose, we would avoid them. And a lot of the traumas fall under this, but we learn from them because we're creatures infinitely capable of change and improvement, but it's important not to kind of conflate the two.
Yes, that's I think there's a big difference between I went through the pandemic, it was hard, I learned my lessons, versus I got to spend time with my kids. Well, okay, great. Are you still spending time with your kids? They're still alive. They still survive.
And you can choose.
Like, you don't get to just schlep them off to school and forget about them again. Like, so I think there is, like, did we learn the lesson of the pandemic or not? I mean, it was a really great opportunity to reset and to self-reflect. And I think a lot of people did self-reflection. I got to tell you, we as human beings can only handle so much suffering. Like, we will break free. And, all of these forces that seek to control us, we will break free. I think it's just in our nature. So when you look outside and the world looks screwed, just remember it's just pendulum swinging towards the center. And eventually we'll find the center again. And so I would not be as worried as we are about the world and its changes, because I do think that we as human beings will eventually figure it out. It may be painful, it may take years, but wouldn't it be better if we figured it out for all of eternity rather than just for today? So I think that's what we need to focus on, is these areas of disagreement that are highly divisive among our culture, and try to find the middle ground and seek the middle ground whenever we can, because that's where we're going to find love and peace and happiness, is a generalized majority, super majority acceptance of an issue. And if we can't find it, we will forever be in war. So if we don't want a war with our neighbors, and we don't want an internal war, and we don't want an external war, then we've got to find this balance in the universe, and we have to help reset it. So I think what we're experiencing right now are a lot of laws that were potentially on shaky ground. And so now we need to, I'm trying to speak about the world in a abstract sort of way, because it's not about a specific issue. It's about how we approach this issue and how we solve it for the long term, which is, you know, there is art that endures, and it's art worth making. And if you think about all the art that's endured in this world, the Bible endured, the Constitution has endured. There are certain ideas that have endured. And, you know, ripping these ideas out and just tossing them and deciding that they're useless is actually very dangerous. We've learned through history that if you don't rely on our elders and the hard lessons that they fought for and won, gave up their lives for, you know, we didn't learn a thing. 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments have some very good lessons in them. You know, Jewish people have amazing lessons. Like, those are lessons we should never forget. And I think that the best way to solve these problems are to codify and create cultures that can endure and withstand our feelings. So feelings create impulsive behaviors, and they're short-lived, but really, really thoughtful, intentional, conscious actions can endure. And I would just say that as a society, as a world, as a people, we really need to come more together. And there's these outliers, they're extremists on the left and right of any topic, religion, political, it doesn't matter, who seek to keep the middle, which is the majority, 97% of us, divided. And so we are not divided, we are human beings. You know, and we are all made of the same star stuff. And so we've got to get back to that. We've got to get back to our commonalities and not our differences.
You know that at Interintellect, this is what we're trying to do since day one. So it's
I think it's really beautiful what you're doing. And I think you are a light worker of your own. And you know it. And so I think that you've aligned your purpose and your intention with your work. And I think that if you can align your intention with what you do every day, there's no more beautiful thing in the world.
It was a long process.
Yeah, it's a long process. But if you are doing the work that you love, and you know it brings other people up, and you know that you're increasing their odds, then you're doing good work. And it does not have to be what you think it is. Like I said, I brought up this duck boat guy. I went on a duck boat tour in Boston, and there's a guy, his name is Rob. If you're ever in Boston, I'll give you his name. And he's a comedian. He could be Jay Leno if he tried. He's so funny. And I asked him afterwards why he gives his job 100%. And he said, every day a fractured family gets on my boat, and you can tell they're not all together. And for 90 minutes, I get to give them an experience that they will hopefully never forget. And I have a chance of mending maybe a tiny little fracture, and to give them happiness so that they remember what it's like to be happy together. And I was like, this man every day gets excited to wake up and go do soul work. And he views his job as not just being a tour guide on a boat. He views his job as being a beacon of light. And so when I told him that I felt that I was there, that I was put there cosmically to show him how beautiful he is, he sobbed and cried. And I ran away after that because I feel like my job was done. But there are people all around us. I think that's the thing we don't realize is mentors and beautiful people are in the places you least expect it. And so you might find the best grocery bagger on the planet who's like, I'm going to put every bit of love into this grocery bag, and I'm going to put the groceries in there just so. And when you take it home and you're going to appreciate it, those people are special because
You
they
can
are,
tell. You can tell it
you
with
can
like
tell.
anything that you receive or you look at in the world. Like there's this 5% more energy that somebody puts in,
Yeah.
and you can tell that this person loves their job, and that includes me, by the way.
Yeah.
when I
I
kind of like cheat out of the 5%, I have to ask myself, why did I just do this as an automaton?
And I think that's where we can step in, which is when you see that somebody gives somebody something 100%, whether it's the most beautiful latte you've ever seen to, a really good Uber driver who really tried to keep you safe and them safe. You tell them, like, I really appreciate that you give what you do 100%, because there's a reason behind it. If you dig, if you ask them why they do it, you'll almost always discover it's for other people, not for themselves.
One of the reasons why I find early trauma so destructive is because it takes away the self-confidence in the good sense. Because in order to see yourself as a light worker and authorize yourself to bring, happiness into the lives of, estranged families, or just like package your groceries beautifully, or, to do every day at your startup or your venture fund as, containing that light, you have to have the self-confidence, right? And this is why it's so important to kind of fight back impulses that want to lower that self-confidence, because it lowers your light work or the efficiency or frequency of it as well.
Correct. That's absolutely right. So like the other thing is, a lot of people, when they experience what I just experienced, end up uprooting their entire lives. So they sometimes they call it a midlife crisis. And it's actually a midlife crisis, might be an awakening. And some people might not realize what they're experiencing and may go back to sleep. And basically, this is when you see them buying cars and all this sort of stuff. And they feel like, I can finally have all the things that I wanted, and then
they marry a younger version of this.
Yeah, I'm going to marry a younger version. But they didn't get the lesson. And so they go back to sleep, and guess what? They're going to have another failed potentially relationship, or, it depends on sort of how they integrated that lesson. A lot of people get nearly hit by a car, and you'll hear them afterwards talk differently. Near-death experiences are often, one way. Sometimes it happens to people and out of nowhere, and they don't even know what happened. Can you imagine how jarring that is? You're just walking down the street and all of a sudden you have an awakening, and so people are like, I don't know what happened. That person is mentally ill, and they're not potentially. Potentially they're just experiencing a surge of serotonin, and they've never felt it before because they got rid of some cobwebs, and they can mistake it for all sorts of things. But I think if we have a good, strong foundation and we know how to breathe through it, and we know what it is and what we're experiencing to some degree, I mean, thank goodness for the internet. Like, if I didn't have the internet, I don't know what I would have done. I would have probably walked myself into a mental hospital and been like, this is so profound, it actually terrifies me. But instead I was like, I think this is what I was searching for. And I think there's a lesson here. So I'm just going to not wear, I was walking around Boston in the same clothes for 5 days and analyzing what clothes are and like why I wear them the way I do. And my friends were maybe concerned. But I came back and they could not deny this. And they were just like, she's clearly fine. But I talk differently. I don't say anymore with absolute certainty there is no God. I can't. I would be dishonest if I said that.
I'm so curious to hear back from you maybe in a couple of months when.
Maybe in a few months. Let's see where I'm at. I'm kind of curious. And I honestly think it's a daily practice. Every day is a new sunrise. Every night is a new sunset. And every day we have the capability of being reborn. And every time you open your eyes, you could say, good morning and welcome in the joy. Or you could say, I got up on the wrong side of the bed. I did not sleep right, and you set the tone for the whole day. If you didn't sleep well, then why aren't you addressing that first? Why aren't you like, gosh, maybe I need to sleep a little longer. Can I cancel these meetings? Okay. Lesson to self, don't make meetings at 10 in the morning. There are ways that you can protect this and keep it, but it means you can't fall back into your old patterns. So yeah, I'm interested to see in 2 months, do I fall back into my patterns, or am I still this Cyan that you were meeting today? I guess we'll find out.
Knowing you a little bit, I think you will. You're more like playing a very, very exciting spiritual video game where you are actually like going up the levels. So I'm not worried about the fallback. But it's an interesting, Buddhist monks talk about enlightenment being a continuous work process. It's not like, oh, once it's done and it's done.
Nope, it's not.
Buddha. Yeah.
You got to keep working. You can deny the work, you'll fall back asleep, or you'll be a new kind of sleep. You might be ever aware that what happened to you happened. And you may understand the steps that you had to take to get back there, and you'll know how to get back. You always know how to get back, but you may choose not to. And so some people decide that a certain level of goodness is acceptable, and they're just going to live on that plane. And that's okay. It's what they call a new normal. Right. But some seek further. I think I'm going to go a little further, but I don't know how far I'm going to go. I don't think I want to end up the guy on the top of the mountain waiting for people showing up to me, because that's where this leads. And I don't think that I want that in my lifetime. That might be a different monk.
I love this. And, this is the good old Greek temperance to know how far to go, because we still want to live in a community, and we want to be tolerable to people and welcoming and able to help in a way that is accessible.
Correct.
Thank you so much, everybody, for having joined us. I think everybody's Twitter handles are in the chat, so you're welcome to follow each other and continue the conversation. Also on Interintellect's forum on Discord. Cyan, I'm more than happy to add you if you'd like to join it. This has been absolutely fantastic. Absolutely.
Yeah, fantastic. I'd love to. How do you follow my journey? Well, I'm on Twitter still until, if Elon doesn't buy Twitter, then I will be off Twitter. I have a Substack that I'm working on. I have two. One is very erratic, and I'll get to it eventually. The other one, it has a purpose, but I just haven't dedicated time to it. And then the other one is me chronicling these life stories that I shared with you. They're very raw, and it's part of my process that I'm going through. But you can start again from birth all the way up to, I think I'm about 15 years old in the story right now. The idea was, when I was done with all of these blogging that I'm doing and sharing the story, was I was going to turn it into a book. And the book is going to be a slightly fictionalized version of what you read, because I don't want to be defined by the book. And I think that's an important part of the healing process, is to not be defined by your past stories. And so part of the art that I'm exploring is, how do I impart that message in a piece of art so that when I die, it endures and lives on. Because I never thought about writing a book about myself to benefit myself made sense. Like, I want this book to leave a dent. And in order for it to leave a dent, it can't be self-serving. It has to be something else. So that's what I'm working on. And if you want to follow it, you can do that there. And then I'm not on TikTok. I'm a little bit on Instagram. And then if you invite me to Discord, I'll be on Discord.
Oh my God, I love it. And I'm actually doing the same thing. I have a new Substack where it's very personal. And then my book is going to be a little bit with a twist. And I really
I love that.
Your take on the legacy aspect of it, because at the end of the day, the way to help as many people as possible is to also think about the future people, because if we continue the existing tendencies, then there will be more people born, in the future than maybe ever before.
Correct. And so we need to create things that endure. And if we're not creating things that endure, we should probably evaluate that. And don't beat yourself up. Don't judge yourself, because that's suffering. Instead, say, could my shopping trip to get groceries be a little more intentional? And then it starts to build. And then you're like, could this code that I'm writing be a little more intentional? What if I left little notes in the code that someone's going to find someday that are Easter eggs? What if I make Easter eggs? What if I, and I think it doesn't have to be 100% of what you're doing is light work, but it could be some fraction of what you're doing is light work, which is hiding things in plain sight for other people to find.
Amen. I can't wait to check back again in a couple of months. I'm sure everybody would be delighted as well. And I'm going to add you to Discord in a moment. Guys, thank you so much for coming and your amazing questions and excellent questions and comments in the chat as well. And Cyan, you are my favorite rock star. I don't know how better to put this. And a special shout out to Ruth. This is Ruth's first salon. She's a host and a lovely early community member and attendee who's just had a baby. So sometimes was off camera. Oh, the baby's there! We'll talk about an arrival. Oh, that's wonderful. Welcome to the world, little one, and it's so great to have you back, Ruth. This is beautiful. So many Interintellect babies now and Interintellect marriages. Talk about the light working.
Yeah, let's make the place better for these babies.
That's the homework for everybody here. Thank you so much, guys. I'm going to stop the recording as well. Lots of love, Cyan. Biggest hug, and see you soon, everybody.
All right, before we go, everybody, do something silly with your hands. Why not? Woo! Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.